New Jersey's governor. It's Ask Governor Murphy at 7 p.m. And a heads up, speaking of the call-in show, Ask Governor Murphy, join us tomorrow for the next Brian Lehrer show. Host Nancy Solomon will join Brian for a debrief of tonight's show and take a hard look at his answers. And they'll take your questions. That is the Brian Lehrer show at 10 o'clock.
WNYC supporters include the Central Park Conservancy. Central Park is a living work of art, and even lifelong New Yorkers don't know its biggest secret, that it is cared for by the Central Park Conservancy, its members, and volunteers. Learn more at centralparknyc.org.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by NinjaOne, the endpoint management platform that automates the hardest parts of IT and helps your employees be more productive and secure no matter where they work at ninjaone.com.
On the show today, we'll talk about the health of small business, the health of household finances, and end with a healthy balance of ice cream. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Viking, exploring the world in comfort. With a fleet of small ships, Viking offers travel experiences for the thinking person. Discover more at Viking.com.
In New York, I'm Kristen Schwab in for Kai Ryssdal. It's Wednesday, May 8th. Thanks for joining. Have you ever walked into your local supermarket or wine shop or hardware store and taken a look at what's on the shelves? Like, really taken a look. What's up for sale and how well-stocked those shelves are can tell you a lot about how a business owner feels about the economy. I say all this because we learned this morning that in March, wholesalers' inventories fell from the month before, down 0.4%, according to the Commerce Department. Meanwhile, in April, a different survey of business owners, called the Logistics Managers Index, shows inventories barely ticked up. So Marketplace's Justin Ho called up a few small businesses to get the scoop on how they're thinking about what and how much they're stocking.
Earlier in the year, Pat Whalen decided to bring in a lot of inventory for his grocery store and wholesaling business in Brooklyn called Sahadi Fine Foods. He imports a lot of products from parts of the Middle East that are really unstable right now.
The political climate there meant I had to bulk up inventory, put a buffer here, and another couple of months to the inventory cycle.
But Whalen says bulking up on inventory is a whole different challenge because it requires borrowed money. And with interest rates as high as they are,
The cost of your inventory is 2 to 3 times what it was a few years ago.
As a result, Whalen says he's trying to be a little smarter about his inventory levels.
We're still going to continue to replenish, but we need to take that buffer down a little bit.
A lot of other businesses had been loading up on inventory this year because they thought if the Federal Reserve cut interest rates soon,
consumers would be ready to spend more.
That's Dale Rogers, a professor at Arizona State University who helps put together the Logistics Managers Index. He says businesses have realized that it's not clear whether the Fed will cut rates at all this year. As a result,
they're making decisions in some cases to postpone purchases until they absolutely need it.
That kind of just-in-time inventory management has a lot of advantages. Catherine Reynolds handles imports at Palmetto Tile Distributors in South Carolina. She's also ordering less inventory right now, and she says that lets her stay nimble.
And if I do see something that's not selling, then I can easily, sell off the last part of it and not have to worry, not be stuck with inventory that's kind of gone stale, so to speak.
Reynolds says keeping inventories low also lets her experiment a little more. For instance, she can bring in a small amount of new Boulder tiles, where it's no big deal if they don't sell. But if they do, then great.
We work with a lot of architects and designers, and it's always good to kind of pique their interest and have the latest, greatest things to offer them.
Reynolds says that can help her boost sales, even when the economy is uncertain. I'm Justin Ho for Marketplace.
Wall Street today, a little up, a little down. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. Yesterday on the show, we talked about the tough spot aspiring homebuyers and even some homeowners are in right now. Well, things are not exactly rosy out there for renters either. In almost every single big city in the U.S. over the last 5 years, rents have grown faster than wages, on average about 1.5 times faster. That's according to new data from Zillow and StreetEasy. There are some exceptions. In Austin, San Francisco, and Portland, wage growth has actually outpaced rent growth. But here in New York, rent has risen 7 times faster than wages. Marketplace's Samantha Fields reports.
I'm going to say it again because I think it bears repeating. Rent in New York City rose 7 times faster than wages did last year. And yes, New York is notoriously expensive, but it's not just New York. It's also Boston, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Chicago.
As long as there are people who are willing to pay those rents and prices, the market will keep going up.
Jenny Schutz at the Brookings Institution says that's what we've been seeing in the last couple of years.
People who own real estate, people who own stock portfolios, people in really high-paid jobs are doing extremely well in this economy. That means they have a lot of money to spend on housing.
And increasingly, a lot of them are renting, partly because there are so few houses to buy. And that is driving up rents for everyone. David Dworkin at the nonprofit National Housing Conference says this is putting a particular strain on lower-income people.
You're talking about the person who makes your coffee, the person who serves you lunch, the people in your doctor's office, the people who come to rescue you if you get into a car accident, the nurse at the hospital.
Over half of renters were cost-burdened as of 2022, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income on rent. Igor Popov, chief economist at Apartment List, says as rents have spiked, we've also started seeing fewer people forming new households.
That means that folks aren't going out and getting that new apartment, aren't moving out from living with parents, with family at the same clip that they were, because they're kind of looking at a market and saying, well, maybe it doesn't make sense right now.
Things are starting to improve for renters in some markets, says Kenny Lee, senior economist at StreetEasy and Zillow.
Austin and Houston, Texas are great examples.
In both of those cities, wages grew faster than rents.
What's different about them is the substantial increase in the supply of new rental buildings. Really, simply put, building more can make such a big difference for renters.
Only most cities aren't doing enough of it. In New York, I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
Let's go from wages and rent to wages and basketball. The WNBA preseason has been selling out games. More than 6,000 people bought tickets to see Indiana Fever rookie Caitlin Clark's debut against the Dallas Wings. Clark and other high-profile members of her draft class, Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, Camila Cardozo, they're expected to draw record crowds and viewership when the regular season tips off next week. But for all the fans and media focus and money these rookies are bringing in, WNBA players have relatively low salaries. They fall in the mid-$70,000 range. But as Marketplace's Savannah Marr reports, new fans and interest from investors could help turn that around.
The WNBA draft isn't typically appointment viewing, but this year 2.4 million people tuned in, more than 4 times the previous record.
The Indiana Fever select Caitlin Clark, University of Iowa.
Clark, who's dressed head to toe in Prada, by the way, has already made over $3 million in endorsements.
Fever, after as decorated a collegiate career as we have ever seen.
She's reportedly working out a $28 million deal with Nike. So it's not like she'll live off her WNBA earnings. But many of her teammates will. And news of Clark's 5-figure salary was astonishing for some fans. Not everyone.
Welcome to the party. We've been trying to figure this out for some time.
Thayer Lavielle is with The Collective, which advocates for women in sports, and recently did an audit of the athlete pay gap.
What we found was that women athletes make 21 times less than men athletes on the field of play.
That's on average. In professional basketball, it's worse. Women make 108 times less than their counterparts in the NBA. And of course, the NBA is 50 years older than the WNBA. It brings in billions more in revenue. But Lavielle says the forces behind those disparities are entrenched.
It's a challenge from needing enough eyeballs in order to get the dollars, but in order to get the eyeballs, you need to get the dollars.
Let's start with the eyeballs problem. For decades, sports media was controlled by a handful of old guard gatekeepers, says Alicia Jessup, who studies the business of sports at Pepperdine.
If you look at who the decision makers are, they tend to be middle-aged white men.
Men who long assumed there wasn't a market for women's sports. So they didn't get TV spots or coverage by sports journalists. But now,
technology, streaming, and social media, what it has done is it's democratized media.
Athletes and teams can market directly to fans, who can watch and engage with women's sports more easily than ever. But Jessup says there's a lingering investment problem.
For so long, women's sport has been treated like a charity case or a side project.
Investors might put a small amount of money behind an athlete or a league, but then back off when they don't immediately see a return. Jessup says leaders in this space don't need to play scared.
What that means is you place your financial bet, but then you double down on it by spending appropriately on marketing and promotion so that your investment can make significant gains.
Like how investors have always treated men's sports. Jessup guesses we're years out from the Caitlin Clarks of the world making multi-million-dollar salaries. But the true fandom and star power around Clark and others in this highly anticipated rookie class could help move things along.
And I tell you what a great time to be a fan of women's basketball.
Keitra Armstrong is a professor of sport management at the University of Michigan. She's also lived and breathed women's sports for decades and watched critics put the blame on women athletes for revenue shortfalls and their low salaries.
There was a time that people thought, yes, women's sports is an inferior version. The media records tell us that's not the case.
Armstrong hopes this wave of fan interest can put that conversation to bed and put a spotlight on the investments needed to get women athletes paid. I'm Savannah Marr for Marketplace.
Coming up,
20 years ago, there was no Amazon. We are trying to compete with all of those service providers.
oh, how times have changed. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 172 points, 0.4%, to close at 39,056. The Nasdaq fell 29 points, about 0.2%, to finish at 16,302. And the S&P 500 barely budged, ending at 5187. Samantha Fields told us about the gap between wage growth and rising home rental costs. Let's check in on some publicly traded rental companies. Invitation Homes shaved off 0.8%. American Homes for Rent subtracted 0.8% as well. Blackstone retreated 1.4%. Ride-sharing firms drove in opposite directions today. Uber shares fell 5.7% after the company reported first quarter results that were kind of mixed. Lyft rose 7.1% after the company reported faster than expected revenue growth. Bond prices fell. The yield on the 10-year T-note rose to 4.49%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by C3 Generative AI. C3 Generative AI enables rapid access to secure, traceable, hallucination-free insights from enterprise systems, all while using any LLM, helping enterprises turn the invisible into the obvious. Learn more at c3.ai. And by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to raising awareness and accelerating action on America's fiscal challenges to build a brighter economic future for the next generation. Learn more at pgpf.org.
Support for WNYC comes from The Joyce Theater presenting Gibney Company, performing 2 iconic works in collaboration with Twyla Tharp, along with a world premiere by 2 rising dance makers. The Joyce Theater, May 7th through 12th. Tickets at joyce.org.
Politicians and the media make crime among migrants a talking point.
There was another brutal migrant attack on New York City.
Should have been jail time for the migrants caught on camera.
Does immigration actually affect the crime rate? Voices from New York City address the complexity for NPR's election series, We the Voters, on the next Morning Edition from NPR News.
Weekday mornings on WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. At 7 o'clock, it's our live monthly call-in special, Ask Governor Murphy. Tonight, host Nancy Salmon will ask the governor about the policies that have to get worked out before the state budget is due at the end of June. That and more at 7 o'clock. Stay with us.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kristen Schwab. Americans, generally speaking, built up a pretty good cash cushion during the pandemic. Economists at the San Francisco Fed found that by August of 2021, we collectively saved up to $2 trillion more than we would have had there been no pandemic. But now those very economists say all the extra savings are gone. So where did all of it go? Marketplace's Kaylee Wells talked to some economists about how they spent their savings and where everyone else's might have went.
Preston Moy earned his PhD during the pandemic. He was dipping into savings, and the stimulus checks he got kept him from dipping too far.
It really helped me out. I probably spent it on takeaway food when I was writing my dissertation.
Now he's a senior economist at Employ America, and he says smaller savings accounts aren't as worrisome for consumer spending as they sound, because there's an even more important factor here: wages.
And the fact that labor income growth is still strong, employment is still strong, and wage growth is still strong leads me to believe that consumption, at least for the foreseeable future, is going to be healthy.
Lots of higher income households saved and invested their money. That's what Scott Baker did. He is a finance professor at Northwestern University who says now that the savings are gone and interest rates are up, loan and credit card payments are more challenging, especially for lower income households with less financial wiggle room where the savings probably ran out months ago.
Those debt payments are going to start to bite a bit more and kind of continue to take a chunk out of the disposable income that households have.
As for one of the economists behind the San Francisco Fed research, Hamza Abdul-Rahman,
I bought a car.
He says that's a good reminder of the fact that savings aren't the only indicator of wealth here. A lot of households like his used their money to buy more non-financial assets, think cars and houses. And that was thanks to
a low interest rate environment and some influx of cash and financial support at the beginning of the pandemic.
Those assets help people to feel wealthier even as their savings dwindle. And Abdul-Rahman and his co-author say the wealthier people feel, the more likely they are to keep spending. I'm Kaylee Wells for Marketplace.
General Electric has been a big piece of American business for 132 years. So big that it's almost hard to remember all of the industries the company has touched. It's made televisions and light bulbs and has even provided home mortgages. But that is the past, because GE is entering a new phase. Last month, it split into 3 separate companies: a wind power business, an aerospace firm, and a healthcare company. Marketplace's Sabri Benishore looks at GE's long history.
The first spoken words in human history to be recorded and replayed were from a nursery rhyme recited by Thomas Edison in 1877. The original recording was destroyed, but Edison re-recorded it decades later.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
5 years after inventing the phonograph, in 1892, one of Thomas Edison's companies merged with another electric company to form General Electric. It wasn't actually Edison's idea. It was J.P. Morgan's, the original J.P. Morgan, like the guy. GE ushered in the age of electricity, and it was big from the get-go.
You have to think of it as sort of the Microsoft, Google, Apple of its time.
William D. Cohen is author of Power Failure, The Rise and Fall of an American Icon. Edison was a better inventor than a businessman and was quickly sidelined from leading the new company, but it continued to create.
In the 1910s and 1920s, it quickly became a powerhouse of invention, innovation.
GE inventors developed radio broadcasts and an electric car. In the 20s, GE got into home appliances. By the 60s, it was making plastics and silicones for the boots and helmets and the moon landing. It also got into the credit business.
It had started during the Depression to help people buy GE products that they couldn't otherwise afford.
By the middle of the 20th century, GE became seen as ubiquitous because it was.
At General Electric, progress is our most important product.
GE had a long and tense history with unions from the beginning, and its desire to escape unions helped drive the company in 1956 to move its computing department out of what would become Silicon Valley and into Phoenix, Arizona. Elizabeth Tandy Shermer is a professor of history at Loyola University.
Phoenix, Arizona has anti-union laws with a more favorable labor and tax policy.
That decision proved fateful. The company that made everything from A to Z ended up losing out on C, computers.
Because the GE computing was so removed from that hotbed of computer innovation, they really got left behind.
But by 1999, GE employed 340,000 people worldwide, nearly 200,000 of them in the U.S. It was still the quintessential conglomerate, and there was a rationale for that.
And this was this notion that some degree of the research would be shared across these industries.
Ted Mann is co-author of Lights Out, Pride, Delusion, and the Fall of General Electric. He's also a reporter at Bloomberg. He says while one tentacle of GE could theoretically help out the others, it could also bring them all down. GE's financial arm almost did both. Under GE's most famous CEO, Jack Welch, GE Capital had exploded.
That grew into what was essentially the seventh biggest bank in the country.
At one point generating 50% of GE's earnings. When the great financial crisis hit, it began to implode and nearly took all of GE with it before being bailed out, along with the too-big-to-fail banks. William D. Cohen.
Right then is when things really began to change.
Under CEO Jeff Immelt, GE sold off NBC Universal to help pay for the fallout of the Great Recession and return to its industrial roots. GE Capital was spun off. GE's different industrial tentacles were chafing at being tied to one another. Again, Ted Mann.
There was a realization that the only way for these companies to thrive and survive was to separate it all.
It took two more CEOs to accomplish that. By 2021, General Electric's headcount in the U.S. had fallen by almost 75% from its peak. And finally, in April of this year, GE split apart into a wind power company, a healthcare company, and an aerospace company. It is no longer the great ubiquitous conglomerate whose products touched both Earth and Moon.
It was this incredible industrial company and built truly incredible things. And so it does feel like we're never going to see a company that looks like that again.
It's a reminder that even the greatest of companies don't have fate on their side forever. In New York, I'm Sabri Ben-Achour for Marketplace.
I grew up in rural Minnesota, and one of my core childhood memories is Schwann's. Schwann's has been around since the 50s, and it's an iconic brand in the Midwest. Its yellow trucks are like freezers on wheels, going door to door, delivering ice cream and chicken strips. I always begged my parents for the orange Flintstones push-ups. If you know, you know. Well, a lot has happened in the grocery industry since Schwann's heyday, like Instacart and Amazon. So in 2018, the Schwann's family sold most of its business to a South Korean food company, which renamed the brand Yellow. Harvest Public Media's Elizabeth Rembert has more on the company's transition.
Since 1965, Mary Bartles has been looking forward to her Schwann's deliveries. She remembers her 9 kids excited to see the delivery man drive his yellow truck down the driveway.
They would get on the truck and climb all over it, and they'd all come in with an ice cream bar or something. And now I realize he was giving those to those kids out of his pocket because I wasn't paying for them.
One of those kids actually happens to be my stepdad, which is how I know that nearly 60 years later, Mary is still ordering ice cream, frozen food, and meals from Schwan's. And on this Thursday morning in Vermilion, South Dakota, it's time for another delivery.
The one that's the manager. Come in.
Hi, Mary.
Hello.
How are you?
Nate O'Grady lets himself in and takes a seat at Mary's kitchen table. He's her delivery man now.
We have time to sit and talk and socialize with people.
He says his favorite part of the job is getting to know the customers along his route.
You get to know the customers well enough. You know exactly what they want when you come to the door. You know exactly what they're going to order. Mary's going to get her peanut butter cups. I know that.
Oh, yeah, that's the best thing they have.
Mary says it's the great service that's kept her buying from Schwan's for nearly 60 years. She doesn't even have to get out of her recliner as O'Grady checks her freezer for what she needs, grabs the order from his truck, and packs it onto the freezer shelves. When the Schwan's family sold most of their business, they kept the delivery service but changed its name to Yellow, spelled Y-E-L-L-O-H. Some customers, including Mary, didn't take much notice.
When did they do that?
The new name is inspired by the unmistakable trucks, according to Bernardo Santana, the company's CEO.
That's one of the reasons we kept the name as Yellow, because of the famous and recognizable yellow truck, to bring back and to keep this connection with our customers.
The makeover comes as Yellow contends with a much different market than when the company started in 1952. Its main competitors used to be local, family-owned shops. Now, online giants like Walmart, Costco, and Amazon are coming for its customers. Yellow is still delivering its own Yellow-branded proprietary products. About a year and a half after announcing its new name, Yellow made another change. It cut 750 employees and closed 90 delivery centers. Santana says it's to keep up with new technology and a more competitive online grocery environment.
20 years ago, there was no Amazon. We are trying to compete with all of those service providers.
The new brand and cuts are part of an overall strategy to modernize Yellow's delivery service, says Akshay Rao, who teaches marketing at the University of Minnesota.
The whole rebranding, cost-cutting through the reduction in their workforce and so forth is part of a strategic shift, which is emphasizing costs rather than customers.
Yellow CEO Santana says customers are still the priority, but the cuts do leave some in the dust. The Yellow trucks used to make deliveries in all 48 lower states. Now it's just 18. Customers elsewhere can get orders via UPS. It's a loss for Deb Kuwamoto. She's in Lincoln, Nebraska, and won't receive deliveries anymore.
It's really kind of ironic because here, Schwan's, they were kind of like the first grocery delivery. And now everybody else has kind of caught up to them.
Ordering from Schwan's and seeing the Yellow trucks felt like stepping back into her childhood.
I think it's the end of an era because I do miss the drivers. I really do.
She says she'll go to the grocery store instead of ordering via UPS, even if the ice cream there isn't as good as Yellow's. In Lincoln, Nebraska, I'm Elizabeth Rembert for Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance, helping protect small businesses with a variety of coverages like general liability, workers' compensation, and commercial auto. More at progressivecommercial.com.
This final note on the way out today, generative AI is certainly going to be transformative, but it looks like for now, a lot of people are just using it because they're tired. Saw this in Wired. A new report by Microsoft and LinkedIn says 75% of people who have desk jobs are using AI at work. The company surveyed more than 30,000 people in more than 30 countries. Nearly 70% of respondents say they struggle with the pace and volume of work, and many of them say they use AI to dig their way out of emails, web chats, and meetings. Our media production team includes Brian Allison, Jake Cherry, Justin Dueller, Drew Jostad, Gary O'Keefe, Charlton Thorpe, Juan Carlos Torrado, and Becca Weinman. Jeff Peters is the manager of media production, and I'm Kristen Schwab. We'll be back tomorrow. This is APM.
WNYC is supported by City Harvest, who are on the road every day rescuing 77 million pounds of nutritious food a year for New Yorkers in need, transforming surplus food into sustenance and sustainability. That's how they feed good. More at cityharvest.org.
It's WNYC. Good evening to you on this super warm Wednesday evening. Coming up next on 93.9 FM and AM 820, it's our monthly call-in special with New Jersey's governor to ask Governor Murphy, coming up next on WNYC. And be sure to join us tomorrow on the Brian Lehrer Show. Host Nancy Solomon will join Brian for a debrief of tonight's show and take a hard look at his answers, and we'll take your questions. That is tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock on WNYC. I wasn't lying when I said it was warm out. 83 degrees right now, mostly sunny in New York City. We'll have a low around 62 tonight. Tomorrow, cooler, high near 72 with rain likely pretty much through the day. It's WNYC just before 7 p.m.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM New York.
This is Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. I'm Nancy Solomon. Tonight we'll talk about whether New Jersey can afford to fund NJ Transit and give seniors a significant break on their property taxes. This is your chance to speak directly with the governor. Call us at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-8255. We'll also be reading your questions via social media using the hashtag AskGovMurphy. Or the number again, 844-745-8255. And we're joined now live by Governor Phil Murphy. Good evening.
Good evening, Nancy. Thank you for having me as always.
I'm happy to be with you here. And I guess we're going to start off on a bit of a sad note. I wanted to recognize that Congressman Donald Payne Jr. died on April 24th. He'd represented Newark and surrounding communities since 2013 in the House of Representatives, taking his father's seat after the senior Payne also died while in office. He was 65, too young.
Yeah.
Got any good Donald Payne stories?
Oh, I love him. He met in my office a few weeks before he took ill. He came in with his great sense of humor, his handmade bow tie, which he always had, with a really good agenda for working families, as he always had. Just a great guy. Everybody loved Donald. And you saw that at his memorial where 60 or 70 members of Congress came up, including Hakeem Jeffries, Jim Clyburn, Nancy Pelosi, Cory Booker. His wife, Bea, is a gem. Their 3 kids are fantastic. I literally just spoke to Bill Payne, his uncle and his father's brother, a few minutes before we went on air. The Payne family are an institution, and they'll continue to be. But Donald was a great guy, a great friend, and there were some great stories. It was one of those memorial services where it tugged at you in a big way, but you also had a chance to luxuriate and laugh and celebrate a great life. So he will be missed. You say that about a lot of people. He will really be missed.
I just learned for the first time chatting with our producer Doug Doyle before the show that he grew up on the same street as Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver.
That is right. That street is famous. In fact, it's 1 block long. One of his neighbors spoke, about 20 of us spoke, and she talked about the sort of history of that street. And to the best of my knowledge, Don lived his entire life on that street.
Wow.
So it's not only that he grew up there, he died there, and in the South Ward, and again, a giant in the context of a giant family.
So you set a special election to fill his seat. There'll be a primary in July and a general election in September. But then there'll be a regular general election in November, and that's where we select the person to serve the full term that starts in January that he was up for re-election, that he would have filled.
Correct.
So the person that wins the special election only serves for 3 months. Is it even worth it, especially since Congress doesn't even do much between October and December because we got the election and the holidays and,
All good points and questions. First of all, Donald will be on the primary ballot.
Yes, I didn't mention that.
On June 4th, so posthumously. Uncontested. So God bless him. The answer is it is worth it, and I can say that not just in my opinion, or Chairman Leroy Jones, who's deeply involved in this as well, but we consulted leader Hakeem Jeffries. And if you do the math, Nancy, and you assume, and this is not always the case, but if you assume that whoever wins that special general in September can be seated immediately thereafter, even within the period of certification, Hakeem made the point that there are significant votes in September, typically and most importantly on the budget, which, as you know, the fiscal year for the feds, our fiscal year ends June 30, feds end September 30. So it was of value to Hakeem and his caucus and to the Congress more generally. And Chairman Jones and I sensed that and immediately went along with that. So it is a little bit unusual. It's not the first time it's happened. You saw this with Senator Cory Booker when he was running the first time when Frank Lautenberg, another dear friend, passed on.
I think that was different because I think in the Senate, the governor actually, when there's a vacancy, the governor appoints somebody.
That is true, but I believe there was
a special election.
That's what I meant, yes.
True,
the governor does not appoint, no one, that's a good point for your listeners. God forbid if this were a senator, the governor would make an appointment. Member of the House of Representatives, it stays vacant until either the special process plays out or until either of the special processes played out.
Right.
So it's worth it is the punchline.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about probably the biggest story going on among that political journalists care about and maybe New Jersey residents care about is the bill.
I'm anxious to hear the end of this sentence.
Is the bill working its way through the legislature that would change OPRA, the Open Public Records Act?
Yep.
So that's the law that that provides that the government must provide public access to documents, and that's the function of how we keep government accountable and watchdog and find out what's going on. There is a bill that would make some serious changes to the law. Many say it would weaken it. I think the thing that people are most concerned about is the fee shifting. But actually, before I ask you about the fee shifting, I mean, as a principle, as a general matter, as you like to say, do you think OPRA needs to change? Do you think that reform is needed?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things, and I'm not going to get into the details of the bill. Among other reasons,
I will.
Yeah, you will. You're welcome to. Kenny and I are very happy to listen to you, because among other reasons, I almost always say if a bill's not on our desk and it's still being baked, we're not going to comment on it. This one is, in addition to that, is moving around a whole lot. There's a lot of moving parts in this one, as you know. I have of two minds in this, and I think you and I talked about this several months ago. This is not, your listeners should also know this is not the first pass at this. This was, I think, a January, as I recall. I believe that's right.
December, yeah.
December, January, so-called lame duck. On the one hand, with the internet, with technology more generally, I think the notion of updating this is a worthy notion. So I think there are good reasons to do that, and I've felt that from the get-go. On the other hand, by doing so, you can't sacrifice something that I think is sacrosanct to a whole lot of people in the state, including yours truly, which is transparency. So finding that middle ground of updating something into the internet era, never mind the generative artificial intelligence era, which is real, all of that is real, on the one hand, but also continues to maintain transparency, which is a hallmark of OPRA, is an objective that we must adhere to as well. So that's my general philosophy on it.
I'm surprised to hear you say that, because my understanding is that if government entities would just digitize all records, then it wouldn't be so much of a burden to supply documents when they're asked for them, because of course we know when things are digitized and you can send them via the computer, it's much easier.
Well, except they're not all digitized right now. So that's one element of this, obviously, but accessing people's personal information is a lot different than it was 20 odd years ago. That's one that I think is a worthy consideration. I'm not going to argue with you. I just think that there are good reasons to update it, but I don't want to throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater, giving people access to our residents, members of the media, which are big purveyors or users of this act. We're a transparent society, we're a transparent state, and we don't want to lose that.
Callers, we want to hear from you. 844-745-8255. You can ask your question of the governor, or you can use social media with the hashtag AskGovMurphy, and we will read your question on the air. So one of the big issues with the Oprah changes is, I think probably the thing that upsets the most amount of people the most is what's called fee shifting. So this is the provision in the current law that allows, if you ask for a government record and you're denied it and you believe you really have a right to it, you can sue the government, and whether it's your local town or your school district or the state. And if you win that case in court, then you get your legal fees paid. Fee shifting works in all kinds of different fields. So this is just such a central part of accountability, because if you don't have the ability to sue to get records that some government official is telling you can't have, then there's no real accountability. It's a toothless law. So why, is this something, are you concerned about the change to fee shifting? And is that something you might consider, conditionally vetoing?
As I mentioned, I'm listening attentively. I also mentioned that in all seriousness, there are a lot of moving parts in this bill right now. Advocates are weighing in. All sorts of folks are weighing in. Obviously, the legislators, first and foremost, are weighing in. They're also weighing in specifically in and around fee shifting. So I'm going to leave it as you suggested or as you described, and we'll see where this lands.
Okay. Well, let's go
You're welcome to try again if you like.
I can see that Kenneth Burns is just dying to ask a question about this.
I do, Governor. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Ken.
So I remember the hearing a couple of months ago in March, and there was a cross-section of New Jerseyans, not just journalists, not just government watchdogs, regular New Jerseyans who used this law to even look at what's in their school district.
Yep.
And looking at the polling from FDU, and in this state, it's hard to get anybody to agree on lunch, but it appears that 81% of about 800 callers polled don't want anything done to Oprah. And ironically, more Republicans than Democrats polled don't want anything done with Oprah. But here's my point. A lot of the advocates point out that this bill does not really do anything as far as digitizing records, and it doesn't do anything to maintain transparency. In fact, it limits it. How is it possible? And forgive me if this comes off rude, but how can we say we're trying to find a balance when a lot of people don't really see the balance in this act?
Is this the Oprah hour, by the way?
It is.
We could talk about this all hour. I'm going to give you the same answer.
Our producers would kill us, but
listen. First of all, I think, and I don't want to speak for the legislators. To their credit, they I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth. They heard a lot of the testimony in the passion around this bill.
But they sent it to committee anyway.
Well, I think it's in a different form than it was several months ago. I'm certain of that, in fact. But I'm not going to go any deeper on it. Yeah. I think it needs to be updated, and we need to hold on to the sacrosanct notion of transparency. Those are the two principles that I would bring to the table in analyzing this, and that's where I've been, and that's where I'm going to continue to be.
Okay, let's go to the phones and take a break from Oprah. We have Eric from Cranford on the line.
Hey, Eric.
Hello, and I want to say hello to everybody. I live in Cranford, and I love it. it's the best place in the world. And now I am a senior, even though I don't feel like one. And I'm reading about property tax relief for seniors. I heard something in the news about it, but I'm not quite sure where it's going or. So if you could elaborate a little bit. But Cranford,
Eric,
New Jersey.
We love
place.
Cranford. Are you a homeowner or a renter?
Homeowner.
Okay. So there's good news already for you, and Jen Stortino is with me tonight, and I would love to ask her to get Rob Field to give Eric a shout. We love Cranford, by the way. By the way, I should also add, I too am a senior. Just want to get
so
that.
Am I.
Okay, it's time for
full disclosure.
Full disclosure hour. We've changed it from Oprah hour to full disclosure hour, which might be the same hour.
Yeah, well, it's all going to be now,
right?
So keep talking.
Eric, we already have a very significant property tax relief program in place called the Anchor program, and that has extra juice if you're a senior. It's means tested, so you have to have an income under a certain amount, but it's a big number. I mean, if you make less than $250,000, you get a significant property tax relief. There is another program that's subject to sort of some conditions that we've been funding now for a couple of budgets in significant size that is called Stay NJ, that will give you even more property tax relief. And so I'm incredibly proud in our administration how much relief we've put on the table, particularly for those who need it most. And we begin with our seniors. And that will only get better with time. Again, I'm going to ask my colleague Rob Field to follow up with you and go through exactly what those programs look like and how you apply for them.
So to just put a little more meat on the bones of Stay NJ. So that's a proposal from the legislature. It would cut property taxes for seniors by up to 50% for those who earn less than $500,000 a year. It would start in 2026, and it's right now under discussion because we're in budget season, and if this is going to work, it has to be budgeted for. Am I correct? By the end of June.
We've already put in our proposal another $200 million on top of the $100 million. So we're sort of building up. We climb these mountains over several years, so that'll get us to $300 million, and then there'll be another significant chunk from there to go.
Right, but there has been some reporting that suggests that there is a little bit of unhappiness, like the legislature, some legislators don't want to fund your NJ Transit proposal because they think it's going to take money away from Stay NJ. You're looking like, no, you're not buying that. That's not true.
No, not that I'm not buying it. Listen, I know enough to be dangerous in year 7 and having been chair of the National Governors Association, the Democratic Congress. I've seen how budgets are done around the country. We do a really good job. May not be the best, but it might be. And part of that is I put my budget proposal out in February, and then we spend basically 4 months going back and forth, public testimony, public conversations, hearings on things, private conversations. And so we happen to be having this program on May 8th, which is at the front end of what will be the most intense amount of time. But we're committed to funding NJ Transit in the manner that we propose, with a combination of steps: a corporate transit fee, a fare increase, which I know people aren't thrilled about, but it's a fraction of the prior administration, and we think we've got a much better system in place. But I don't make light of that, but that's a fact. A ongoing transfer from the state government, and we're also asking NJ Transit. You may have seen some headlines lately that we are asking them to go under a very significant restructuring, because someone asked me a few weeks ago, do fares only go up? And my answer emphatically is, I hope the answer is no. Do the corporates have to pay forever? I hope emphatically the answer is no. Does the state have to continue to transfer money forever? I hope the answer is no. So those discussions are ongoing, and we're committed to Stay NJ. In fact, we put our money where our mouth is. But as you know, Nancy, and I have been through this for a bunch of years, the budget gets negotiated. I think it gets negotiated well. The criticism I think we rightfully take, and I'll take it first and foremost, is that the denouement, the absolute end of this,
French
easy now, the absolute end of this comes very quickly, but the process does not. And it's a full vetted process, and we'll see where things land.
Do you have any concerns that you're not going to get agreement and that there is not going to be a transit corporate tax?
I won't get into the specifics, but I feel really good about the relationship that we have with the Senate President and the Speaker of the General Assembly in their respective caucuses. And none of this is easy, but I am highly optimistic that we'll land in a good place, as we always have.
So we're going to have close to $1 billion extra funding for NJ Transit, and in 2026, those of us over the age of 65 or 2 are going to get about a 50% property tax cut, yes?
God willing.
Okay. You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy. I'm Nancy Solomon. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Thanks for listening.
Puberty blockers and hormones are sometimes used to help gender-distressed children, but a new groundbreaking review from the UK says the science behind that practice is far from settled.
The studies that the team looked at, well, the quality was disappointingly poor. None of them really effectively reproduced results seeing improvements in mental health.
That's on the next On Point. Weeknights at 8 on WNYC, or live stream it at wnyc.org.
WNYC supporters include ALS United Greater New York. May is ALS Awareness Month, and during this time, ALS United Greater New York is working to increase awareness of the disease and the burden it creates for those living with it and their families. More at als-ny.org.
Tomorrow on The Brian Lehrer Show, Brian and Nancy Solomon will break down tonight's Ask Governor Murphy and take your questions about it. Tune into The Brian Lehrer Show. That's tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock on 93.9 FM or AM 820 WNYC.
You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. Got a question for New Jersey's governor? Call us now at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. Or pose your question on Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag AskGovMurphy.
We're live in the studio with Governor Phil Murphy. I'm Nancy Solomon, and we're taking your calls. So let's take another one. We've got Luca from Forked River on the line.
Hello, Luca.
Hi, my name is actually Lucas from Forked River. Governor Murphy, no worries. Nice to be on the line with you. I just want to
love Forked River, by the way, Lucas.
Me too. As a registered Democrat, I voted for you. I approve of all you've done. I'm a big proponent of you. But we're kind of in a pickle down here. You've pulled quite a bit of funding in state aid from our school district. I have 2 kids in the district, and as one of the quote-unquote overfunded districts, they're now cutting again this year 57 teachers. And they're saying classroom sizes are going to go up to 44 kids. We're going to have pay-for-play athletics. And I'm all for spreading the wealth. You know, it's Teacher Appreciation Week. All districts deserve to have their money. And my board, has done a really great job. They've raised, the cap 2% every year, trying to spread the funding around, and it's just not adding up. So I know that there's a bill in the Senate Appropriations Committee going through. I've called my state Senator Amato, trying to get him to fund it and get it to go through. My question to you is, 1, do you support that bill to restore funding this year? Give those grants to us school districts that need it for our kids to go to school and have the education and the class sizes that we need. And 2, are we going to fix this proprietary algorithm that is, giving the aid to the districts that need it, but robbing it from from us down here who have the property values that are supporting our districts, but it's being pulled too fast.
Got it. So, Lucas, let me answer. And Nancy, can you give me a minute on this one, because this is a complicated one and it's an important one. So, Lucas, thank you. First of all, I'm going to ask Jen to get both the aforementioned Rob Field and Dennis Ebeloff, our head of policy, to follow up with you within the next 24 hours. So, again, a couple of bigger picture points. The last administration underfunded what would have been the school funding formula that you referred to, Lucas, by $9 billion. We got into office working then with then Senate President Steve Sweeney, Speaker Craig Coughlin. We made two decisions. Number one, we were going to migrate and update the school funding formula demographically, because it had been frozen in time essentially, to where the actual demographics of the state are. But we would take 7 years to do that. This happens to be year 7. And then separately, we would that same 7-year period would match an increase in funding that we would ultimately fully fund public education in the state of New Jersey. And with the budget we proposed, we'll be the first administration ever to do that. There are of all the districts, there are about 65% quote-unquote winners year over year. There are about 5% of the districts that are flat, and there are about 30%, I think it's 141, that are down. Most are down modestly, some are down meaningfully. Lucas, I don't know the Forked River dynamic, but there are typically two reasons why a district is down. Number one, capacity, meaning they've got either more schools, more seats, or both relative to the actual population. The second reason is the local ability, the local share, the local wealth, if you will, has gone in a good direction, which then the formula, again, this is a formula, you use the word algorithmic, which is a good word. This is not me or my colleagues in a room just making up numbers. If the local ability to pay goes up, the formula suggests that the state does not need to pay as much as they did the year before. Those are the two principal reasons. Having said all of that, we care deeply for every little precious kid. We want to find, and I think we have over the first 6.5 years, we want to find a good solution. There is legislation. There's legislation out there. I won't comment on the specific legislation, but there are very intense and constructive conversations with our legislators and stakeholders trying to find at least a better place. I'm not sure we can solve all of the issues, but at least a better place. And I would say, Lucas, I'm optimistic we will do that. There are elements, and Nance, I'll conclude with this, elements of a better place would probably be some amount of money. Secondly, there is a May 15 deadline on staffing and other budgetary decisions, which I believe we and many think is an ill-timed deadline. We should have something that is probably more akin to the budget deadline. That's something that people are looking at. And then the other question Lucas referred to, not mandating it, but the notion of at least allowing a community, if they said, listen, we don't want to do pay-to-play for sports, and by the way, who could blame you? But if we were able to go above the 2%, if we had that ability, we might be able to put a couple of $100 more in that would allow us to field both I'm making this up, a football team and a field hockey team. So those are some of the moving parts. We take this deadly seriously. I will have the team follow up with you on the specifics in Forked River. We've got this down to a seat, literally. So while I don't have the information for you right now, our team does, and they will follow up. So hang in there. Sorry it takes so long, Madam Chair.
It sounds to me, and if I'm correct and heard what Lucas was saying, that the problem in a place like, and did I pronounce it wrong? It's called Forked
River.
Or Forked River.
Yes.
That in a place like that, people would like to be able to pay more property taxes to fund their schools, but they are under the 2% cap.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the town. I don't know that for sure there, but I know for sure there are communities where they are willing to do that. And Listen, there are other communities. We've talked about this. This is not Forked River, to the best of my knowledge, where you get 3 high schools. You should have 2. I get it, by the way, incredibly emotional. That's where my football team was, my favorite teacher, my dance recital, my graduation. I get it. It's not easy. So we want to work with communities, but it's also, in fairness, not all on me and us. If that's a local conscious decision, folks have to say, okay, that's a conscious decision we're making. Would like the state to maybe meet us halfway or come up with some relief, but we also know locally we have a responsibility to play a part in that as well. So those are discussions, and again, we have a lot of constructive ones right now. We're trying to land with the legislature, and I have nothing but good things to say about them. We're trying to land in a good place. We'll see.
Okay, let's take a question from social media. We have WHYY's Kenneth Burns with us. What do you have?
Hi, Ken.
Hey, Governor. Let's go back to transit. Bill and Pittman would like to know if the legislature does not approve the proposed corporate fee surcharge for NJ Transit, are you willing to cancel the planned NJ Turnpike expansion projects and redirect funding to NJ Transit as part of a Plan B revenue alternative?
Yeah, Bill, I'm going to ask actually my Chief of Staff, Diane Gutierrez-Cacchetti, who's the former Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, and just an incredible professional, to follow up with you, Bill. Jen, if you could make note of that. The answer is you can't, and they have nothing to do with each other. So I know there are a lot of folks out there who think you can. You actually can't, number one. And number two, we need to do both. We need when I say permanent, I'm going to put a footnote on the word permanent. We need a permanent funding source for NJ Transit until they can stand on their own 2 feet. As I mentioned earlier, I don't want to repeat it. This is not a forever and for always. And we are way under, and I know there are advocates out there who don't agree with me on this, and I feel badly about that. I'll just make 2 comments. We are way under infrastructured for automobile and truck traffic, even though we're building 2 brand new tunnels under the Hudson, and we're going to get as many people on rail as we can. The numbers suggest that we're going to continue to have a lot of car and truck traffic and bus. And secondly, here's the good news. It's only a matter of time until most of that's electric. So the pollution arguments are accurate today. They will not be accurate by the time this project is done. So we need to do both. Again, I'll have Diane follow up with Bill.
So we're talking about the New Jersey Turnpike extension, that's 78 East, that goes from the airport to the Holland Tunnel. So I think you're addressing one complaint about that project, which is that you're investing in fossil fuel and transportation, and you're saying, yeah, but it's going to be electrified.
Yeah, if it were done tomorrow, that would be an argument that would hold a lot of water. I wish it were done tomorrow. It won't be, and it'll be a different mix.
The other complaint about that project is that you can't increase capacity at the tunnel, so you're merely widening the road so that it eventually has to narrow and back up at the Holland Tunnel. So why is it a good idea given that?
You should have asked the commissioner instead of asked the governor, because a lot of the backup actually is in the bottleneck that precedes that. And my folks always remind me the numeric thing. I think it's $10.7 billion. People, I think, and maybe it's our fault for giving them this impression, think that it's just lying around in a room somewhere. It's money that's going to get bonded over a period of 20 years. So it's not even if you could take it, it isn't sitting there. But a lot of the answer to your first question, Nance, is that the experts will tell you that a lot of the bottlenecks occur preceding the actual entrance to either the Holland or the Lincoln.
Okay, let's take another call. We have Lisa in Garfield. Lisa, you're on the line.
Hello,
Lisa.
Hello, Governor Murphy. Thank you for taking my call. My question is would the state of New Jersey, you as the governor, consider reinstating vehicle inspection? The reason I ask this is because we have a huge problem with noise pollution from modified mufflers and timing belts. At night, you can't have your windows open. It's bad enough you have traffic, just traffic in general. But with the noisy mufflers, and they're screeching up and down the roads all night long. The
They
police
also
can't
cut the
do
tailpipe,
very
which
much.
is another annoyance, right?
And, our police officers really cannot do too much to these people because they're not breaking the law. If I feel that if we had the inspection back, they'd have to go inspection. They wouldn't pass with their mufflers being the way they are, and they would have to, fix them so they'd go through, motor vehicle inspection and get passed. But then they would have to, if they had to go back and modify it again, it would become a real pain. But I think that might alleviate some of the problems we're having with the noise. And I'm not just speaking just for Garfield. I know it's all the towns.
Yep.
Saddlebrook I live right on the borderline of Saddlebrook and Lodi, and I hear them all night long, up and down 46, on Outwater Lane. It's terrible.
Yep.
Lisa, can I ask a question? I'm confused when you say we don't have the inspections anymore. What do you mean? Because we do have inspections, right?
We do have inspections, but the inspections are not for like modified exhaust systems.
I see. So it's not one of the things that you have to be passed.
Right.
Yeah.
I got to, Lisa, I got to. Yep, I got to get Trish or one of her people in the senior folks at the Motor Vehicles Commission, or Dennis again, Jen, somebody either from our team or her team. I believe that a cut tailpipe is illegal. Pat Callahan is listening. He'll correct the record if I'm wrong about that. I'm virtually certain that they are illegal, and they contribute a lot of the noise that Lisa is referring to. But Lisa, I'm not going to. I agree with you 100%. I'm down in Monmouth County, and I travel around the state all the time, and this is a real issue. I'm open-minded. I'm not sure. I think you make a fair point. Inspection is one thing. Modification, probably the day after the inspection, is another thing, which gets more into a law enforcement matter. But allow us to follow up with you, and we will do so. But know that there's violent agreement on the reality of the problem.
Thanks for your call, Lisa. Let's keep those phones open. We have Elizabeth from Jersey City on the line.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, Governor Murphy. Thank you for taking my call. God bless you. I'm a lifelong resident of Jersey City. I'm 70s, upper 70s, but I worked on the polls, my whole life, and of course I'm a voter. I voted for you. I was happy to. My problem is that I was not aware, of the Anchor program. I know this may seem like ancient history, but I had not been aware of it. And I was at physical therapy, and the guy in the next booth there had mentioned it, and so I went right ahead, and my sister's got a computer, and she go ahead and applied for me back in November of last year, and so she she's a homeowner. She had gotten hers, and I didn't know about it. So I'm a tenant in Jersey City, and I've been living in this building for 8 years. And so we applied, and every time I checked, I received nothing back, no information, nothing. Yeah, and it said pending. It just said pending.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. You said you applied in November?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's just not right. So I'm going to have the aforementioned Rob Field, who knows Jersey City like the back of his hand, follow up with you immediately. Because if you're a renter and you're a senior and you applied, there is no reason why you shouldn't have gotten a refund. Maybe there is, by the way, Elizabeth. It's possible there's something associated with your application, but you should have received that, and I will promise you we're going to get on it immediately. And God bless you.
Thanks for your call, Elizabeth. So let's talk for a few minutes about the student protests that are happening around the country about Gaza.
You don't want to go back to Oprah?
Not yet. Give me a chance.
Okay.
Rutgers University is one of the few places where a college president has been able to actually find enough agreement with students to end the encampment. And yet yesterday you criticized Rutgers. Isn't that exactly what a college presidents should be doing? Listening to students, finding a resolution that doesn't involve arrests and violence and disruption?
Yeah, I mean, that part was obviously a good thing. There could have been violence, and that would have been unfortunate. When I criticize
violence by police against protesters in most cases,
and perhaps responses.
Yeah.
If you listen closely to my answer, the criticism was, and people I think rightfully have this. Let's put aside for a moment. You're starting to play the music on me, so we may have to come back to this one.
We have 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I think the criticism was specific to the following. One group of students, for lack of a better word, raised a lot of hell, got an audience. There were 10 items with a specific set of course of actions. There have been Jewish students or faculty or staff since December, I'm told, who gave a list in of their concerns, and they've yet to hear back. That's not acceptable.
And who's complaining to you about that? How are you hearing about this?
The Jewish community is, on that particular point, is outraged.
Yeah. Okay, we'll return to this. You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. I'm Nancy Solomon.
And you're listening on WNYC. Coming up in 20 minutes at 8 p.m., it is On Point. That's followed by the storytelling series The Moth at 9. Q is at 10 o'clock tonight. Still warm outside, 81 degrees, partly sunny at 7:40.
On the next Brian Lehrer Show, on the things to do before Election Day list, Biden's race to Trump-proof his legacy. That's how Politico describes the need to spend billions of dollars fast on climate, infrastructure, and other things passed by Congress, but that Trump might undo. We'll hear details. Also, WNYC's Nancy Solomon with excerpts from and analysis of her Ask Governor Murphy call-in show. The Brian Lehrer Show, weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from Just Another Day. Dan Lauria and Patty McCormick return to the New York stage in Just Another Day, a new play written by Dan Lauria himself, through June 30th only. Tickets at justanotherday.theater.
You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. Got a question for New Jersey's governor? Call us now at 844-745